Okay, is everyone ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we are live in 5, 4, 3, 2.
Good morning and welcome to the June 18th, 2020 special meeting of the Charles County Board of Education. Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, the matter we have at hand today is a report item regarding the budget, the proposed budget. So Ms. Fisher-Davis, you have a report for us, please?
Good morning. Thank you, board members and Dr. Hill, for gathering together this morning. I have the opportunity to present the final FY21 operating budget that the superintendent has developed for consideration by the Board of Education. While continuing to focus on academic success and career readiness for all students, the approved operating budget totals $401,007,950. Additional funding of $7.5 million represents a 1.9 increase over the current operating budget. The revised draft calculations from the major state aid programs from MSDE issued on May 29th presumes an increase in funding of $2.6 million or 1.4%. The revised draft calculations for the blueprint to Maryland's future programs, or Kerwin, also issued on May 29th, presumes an increase of $371,000 for the supplemental pre-K grant. Our requested county funding increased by $3.6 million or 1.9%, which includes the required maintenance of effort increase of $1.9 million, in addition to a one-time non-reoccurring cost of $32,750 for the upgrade of CCPS TV. This budget also includes a transfer from fund balance of $1 million over the amount that was needed in FY20. Expenditure increases include a reserve for collective bargaining, state-mandated teachers' pension contribution, the nurses' contract with Charles County Health Department, mandatory school bus replacements, and MAID liability insurance and workers' comp premiums. Funds would also support student enrollment growth. Thank you again for your time this morning. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Ms. McGraw. Ms. Fisher-Davis, could you please go over, and maybe Mr. Heim can speak to this, the line item under bus contracts for $2 million. Can you please explain the need for those buses?
So currently we have budgeted 44 replacement buses and 3 new enrollment growth buses and salaries.
So the
which is about $2 million.
The 44 replacement buses are buses that have gotten to the point of 15 years. So in Charles County, our buses stay on the road for 15 years. And at the end of that 15 years, per Comar and the special exemption we have, along with some other counties in the state, those buses have to be taken off the road. So we're only actually purchasing 3 additional buses, as Ms. Sherry Fisher-Davis had said, and that's to address enrollment growth we've seen over the last several years.
All right, thank you.
Proposed budget? Can you see me? Lockhart? Madam Lockhart? Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question. I know I know this happened last year, but in regards to the increase in the meal this year, now is this something that happens every year, or is this because of the COVID and everything else?
Are you talking about for the meal prices?
Yeah.
Okay. The Food and Nutrition Service Program will comply with Maryland CARES Act HB 315. So meal prices will increase 5 cents for breakfast and 10 cents for lunch. So it doesn't really have anything to do with COVID. This was prior to pandemic.
So it increased on our last budget. So is this a yearly thing that's happening?
I am not sure.
Because I asked the same question last year, and because there was an increase.
I can certainly look into that, and I can give you a definitive answer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions and comments? Mr. Lucas?
So, just for clarity, the difference in the budget that we see here today between this budget and the previous budget reflects a difference in the amount of money that we were afforded by the county commissioners versus what we requested. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So I will make a comment, and and Mr. Schwartz, you can chime in, but this budget, as is every budget, was built on the previous year's budget, and going forward, there are a lot of things that certainly are going to be very different in the coming school year, and the $2.4 million in collective bargaining assumptions, we are asking all of our personnel to do a lot, and I am really not comfortable with that number. I think that number needs to be higher, and I would have a very hard time going forward knowing what we're asking all of our personnel to do. And my personal preference, and if it's the will of the board, I would like to see options to where that number can be increased at least $1 million and potentially up to over $6 million, and to see options on how we can achieve that, and whether the board directs the superintendent to come back with a revised budget or whether we take a vote and move on. I'll leave that to Mr. Schwartz to tell us what the best process is for that. But employees, and with what we're asking them to do, I just don't think that is sufficient.
Any comments regarding that? Mr. Hancock?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to agree with Lucas on that. It is unfortunate that our budget was not fully funded, but at the end of the day, we do have a $400 million budget that we can work with. I share his sentiments. In the fact that we very well, possibly, depending on what the state says we can do, maybe sending all of our staff back into an environment that is going to be very difficult for them to work in, and they also may be afraid of it. I agree with Mr. Lucas personally. I think we need to find the money to show all of our staff that we're going to support them in this. I just want to let everyone know that I support what Mr. Lucas is asking.
I agree. This is Taj. I agree with David and Mike as well. It's unfortunate that the county didn't support us in the funding that we requested. However, we need to make every effort that we can to ensure that our staff is really taken in consideration as we move forward into our new normal because they have in this fourth quarter done some really hard work, and it's going to get even harder before it gets any better as we move forward. So I agree with David and Mike on this one.
Mrs. Abel?
I would like to concur with what my fellow board members have already stated. We need to ensure that our staff feels supported, both certificated and our support staff. So I would concur with everything they've said.
Ms. Brown?
I agree with my colleagues. I would like to see us really do our best to try to make sure that we're supporting both support and certificated staff.
We have had some time to take a look at the budget. Does anyone have any suggestions where we might find the additional money? I know that we just received the revised budget, but we have had it for a while. Are there any suggestions as to how to guide the staff?
Says Mr. Lucas.
Mr. Lucas?
So I think that number, as my fellow colleagues have agreed, needs to be larger, and I think that that we can leave that to the superintendent. As I said, this budget was built on a paradigm, not just our school system, but every school system that's not going to be in existence in the next school year. There are a lot of things that aren't going to happen because of COVID. And I would look at those things and look at the things that in the past have been consideration for funding or not funding because of funding that was not received, that was requested either from the state or local government. So I would like to hear what the superintendent has to say, and then pending a revised budget that reflects an increase in the collective bargaining assumptions, we can have further discussion as a board.
Good morning, everyone. I certainly appreciate and agree with the premise that our people are the most important part of this organization. It's something that has been front of mind for my team since we began this adventure in 2013. It has always been the people who make the school system. We're at a point where decisions have to be made about how to move forward with the school system with the limited amount of dollars that we have. I understand what Mr. Lucas is saying, and at least my understanding of what you're saying, Mr. Lucas, is that there should be other areas in this budget that we can take money from to shift those resources to our employees for compensation. The issue becomes the unknown, which is really what we're dealing with right now and through the fall. We don't know what schools are going to look like in the fall, and we are working very hard to come up with options for how to reopen schools in the fall. But in addition with that unknown is the fact that we're going to probably be spending more money on things like sanitation and cleaning supplies and food service because of the different way that we have to do this. I value every single employee in this organization, but I have to make very difficult decisions on how to run this $400 million operation. And there are certain costs that don't change and don't go away. If we had additional funding, it absolutely would go to our people. But when we initially brought a budget to this board, we asked the board about their willingness to tolerate us budgeting for 98% employment rather than 100% employment, because that's really where we might be able to find some money. And this board directed me to continue to budget for 100% employment. And so really, that's the only place that, in looking at this budget, that I could find money, and that is to budget for lower levels of lapsed salary by budgeting for 98% employment. I'm not 100% comfortable with that. And a few weeks ago, neither was the board. But I'm paid to do what you direct me to do. And so if you're changing your mind on that, and you want us to budget for 98% employment, that certainly might be a way that we could free up some funds. But then we need to remember that what we're doing is we're budgeting kind of on a deficit model. We're budgeting, rolling the dice, that we won't be at full employment. And I have a responsibility that I just need to share that with the board and with the public, that I'm not 100% comfortable with that. I know other organizations are doing it that way. But I don't want to ever have to go back to the county or back to the state when a boiler blows up or a storm comes, or we have some unexpected costs, and then we can't fund it. We can't take care of it. Those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Hill. Ms. Bella Lockhart.
I just want to say, as it relates to the budget, and as we move forward, I understand all the things that we're going to face, but I just want to say publicly that our support services and building service staff need some attention. And if we don't do that this go round, I think that's going to be more of a challenge for us in the future than anything that we're dealing with, because we need to take care of them. They're the ones that's going to get the brunt of the, they have gotten the brunt of the challenges during COVID, and they're going to continue to get the brunt of the challenges during COVID. So I understand everybody's concerns. I understand that there's unknowns, but at this point, we have to make decisions that is going to ensure that and give some comfort somewhere. And I think our building services and our support services workers are those ones that we need to focus on right now. And like we've talked about this several times. So whatever we can do to make it happen, we should be able to find a way to make that happen. If we don't make it happen for anyone else, but if we can for everybody, we can, but we can't. I would love for them to be our priority. That's just my personal opinion.
Mr. Lucas.
So, Dr. Hill, I appreciate your comments, and you made reference to the 100% staffing, and that, of course, was when we made our initial budget submission. And what we have received from the commissioners is this, I will say, is historically much less versus what we've requested from them. And so whereas 100% staffing was our initial stance, that's certainly something that can be looked at. We've made cuts in other areas when we didn't receive funding to fully operate St. Charles High School. There were a number of, as you recall, Dr. Hill, there were a number of items that got cut. One of those things were the athletic trainers, okay? That is a pretty hefty bill of a few $100,000, okay? And given COVID, no one knows whether that will even come to full fruition. But it's items like that I think we need to look at in the budget. Transportation with regard to field trip and extracurricular activities, I think we can all pretty safely say those are probably not going to happen, certainly not in the beginning of the school year. So those are items that we can look at and have some savings that we can apply to the people that we know are going to be there, the people that Ms. Battle Lockhart just mentioned. Again, ASME and our teachers who are going to have to operate in again, a very different paradigm and potentially be in a school building under very different environment. So I feel very strongly, I don't think it's too much of a stretch to find $1 million just in those things that I mentioned without an adverse effect on the school system. And so I would request then that we delay our vote until we see some options in order to increase the line item for the collective bargaining assumptions.
Dr. Hill.
Mr. Lucas, I appreciate your comments, and I understand and completely support what you're saying. I also completely support what Ms. Battle Lockhart said about our support staff. We value everything that they do. But when you're talking about trying to shift athletic trainer money or field trip money or extracurricular money, those dollars are one-time expenditures in a budget year. And so if we, athletic trainers, if we pull it, let's talk through your idea, because I want to explore it. If we pulled athletic trainers for this coming school year, at some point, we're going to have to put them back when athletics return. And we've already taken that money then if we pull them this year, and we've committed it to something else, which is a recurring cost. I don't completely share the idea that we may not have athletics in the fall. The MPSSA is putting out guidance now that how to do safe return to play and safe return to practice and that sort of thing. So what happens if we take that money from what we would spend in the fall on coaches and transportation and officials, all those costs, and we apply it to salaries, and then in 2 weeks or a month, MPSSAA says we're going to resume athletics. Does Charles County Public Schools say, no, we're not going to participate? I'm 100% with you in wanting to find money for our people, but we've looked and we've gone through scenarios and we've tried to figure out how we can meet the goals that the board has put in front of me, which clearly is take care of our support staff and take care of our teachers. I've heard that. I just don't have any other places where I can responsibly say we can take this money and apply it to salaries and then commit to that for the life of the employee.
So,
Mr. Lucas?
Two comments. No one ever said anything about not participating in athletics. Okay, participation and having athletic trainers are two entirely different things. And as we've seen in history, you yourself made the decision for a brief period of time not to fund the athletic trainers. Okay, and sports can and will and has and will continue to go along without necessarily having an athletic trainer there. The question then becomes, you have to make a hard decision. What do you value more? Okay, and we just heard about all the employees in the system and the jobs that they're going to have to do. The transportation to and from games will still be there, but transportation for a lot of field trips, I don't think is a reality, at least not to the extent that we have seen in the past. And again, you said the budget was built on 100%. I would just like to see an option if it were at 99%. Okay, it's easy to go back to see how many people we actually hire every year versus the number of positions that are open. So what's a number if it's 99% versus 100%? I think those are options that the board needs to see, and then the board can make a decision going forward.
Mr. Lucas, this is my time. I'd like to provide a little additional clarification about field trips. So when we consider field trips and the cost and transportation, that's not including all field trips that any student may take during the particular course of the year. So, for example, a class field trip to the zoo, the cost of that transportation, along with any cost for entrance to the zoo, is part of the cost that's passed on to the student and the parents. So, the typical field trips that you think about at a school, going to the zoo or going to a museum, the 8th grade students at the end of the year when they go as a class to King's Dominion, that transportation is part of the fee that they pay. So when we're talking about field trips, a big part of that would be things that for special education and also the trips to the Science Center are covered under field trips. Which again, with the Science Center trips, they may not occur based on the fact that we may be trying to isolate those students who are in the school and not limit the mobility of them. But just keep in mind that the field trips does not cover every type of field trip that we would think about.
Thank you.
Dr. Hill?
Mrs. McGraw, if the board would like to, I hear that the board would like us to revisit this budget. In order to do so, I'd like some direction from the board regarding full employment versus 98% employment, because the direction I was given prior to today was stay at 100%. And if I'm going to be tasked with finding several $1 million to be able to move it to a different category, I need to look at staffing, because 81% of our budget is committed to people. And that's where the bulk of the money would be to be able to find enough money to do what the board is asking me to do. So I'd like to suggest that there be some sort of consensus or vote on doing a 98% model.
Comments? Ms. Abel?
If we are going to go that route, I would like to see 98 and 99, but also take another look at the other categories that Mr. Lucas mentioned to possibly see where additional savings can be made, not just reducing staffing.
To be clear, just for my clarification, Mr. Lucas, so you ask, there is money in the budget for compensation for both our support and teacher level, certificated level employees. And we are asking to go back to negotiate with both of those entities. It will not be at the amount that they originally proposed. So are you proposing that we fund them at the original request, which was 2% COLA? No?
I'm Mr. McGraw, I don't mean to interrupt you. I'm not delving into the specifics of those items. All I'm asking is that the line item in the budget for collective bargaining be increased, and what I asked for was at least a $1 million increase, and to see how we could fund that.
So you're asking for a $1 million increase.
And on a separate note, I'd like to know what our balance is and our unobligated fund balance.
Dr. Hill, what is the timeline that we have to work within? Because I know we were having this special meeting today because the commissioners need to finalize their budget. So do we have a deadline with the commissioners?
We do. We need to. Am I? Yeah, I am. We need to have everything finalized by June 30th. Our fiscal year begins on July 1st. Staff is already busy trying to plan for rollovers of payroll and that sort of thing for salary items. So time is of the essence.
Okay, thank you. Well, I need to take then, are there any further comments? So if I'm clear, I need a consensus as to a couple of things. Maybe Mr. Lucas would like to see a $1 million increase in the budget for compensation. He's also asking for what our balance is and unobligated funds. Is that correct?
Unobligated fund balance, yes.
Unobligated fund balance.
Minimum
Ms.
of
Holstein?
1 million.
Can I just ask one clarifying question? The $1 million, is that recurring salary money or one-time stipend money? Because those are very different for us.
It is,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, no, a $1 million increase in the collective bargaining assumption, which would be a recurring cost.
So you're looking for recurring salary, not one-time stipend money?
Yes, ma'am. But again, I'd also like to understand our available fund balance in the unobligated fund balance line.
Okay, there's also a second consensus that we need to take, that Dr. Hill requested that she be directed whether we want to staff at 98% or 100%. Is that correct, Dr. Hill?
Yes.
Or I believe Ms. Abel also asked for 99%.
Okay, good. 98, 99. All right, so to move forward, those that are in agreement with Mr. Lucas's proposal, Ms. Abel? I'm taking a consensus. Ms. Abel, are you in agreement?
Yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Battle Lockhart? Ms. Battle Lockhart?
Yeah, yes. Mm-hmm.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
And McGraw will say yes. So the second consensus is for the to look at the category of 98, 99% staffing. Ms. Abel?
Ms. McGraw, that also includes looking at the other categories.
And other categories, I'm sorry, that was at the bottom of my paper. And looking at other categories.
Okay, yes.
Ms. Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Battle Lockhart?
Yes.
Ms. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock, I'm sorry.
Either one.
Wife's not here.
We call it work.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson? Yes. And McGraw, yes. All righty, so I think we need to set a timeline. What is reasonable, Dr. Hill, what would you consider to be, and Ms. Sherry Fisher Davis would be reasonable for you to come back with us with that information?
Sherry?
Given the timeline that we have to meet for the commissioners.
Right.
We need at least a couple of days to pull all of the information together, at least on the 98 and 99%, and to look again at the other categories. So at least 3 or 4 days.
So next week, Mrs. McGraw, is the last full week of June. Ms. Fisher Davis, if we can have something prepared by Wednesday, the 24th or Thursday, the 25th.
Ms. Fisher Davis, is that?
Yes, I can do that by, I will shoot for Tuesday, 23rd.
Thank you.
All right, any other discussion on the budget?
Chair,
Yes, sir.
just for clarification purposes for the public, just so that they know, we're not asking for a $1 million increase to the budget. We're just asking to readjust that $1 million. So I just wanted to make that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if there's no further discussion at this time, we will need to move to go into executive session. Mr. Schwartz?
We need a motion for the board to meet in executive session as permitted by the Maryland Open Meetings Act, Section 3-305 and 3-43 of the General Provisions Article to discuss personnel matters concerning the superintendent's recommendations on appointments, negotiations concerning collective bargaining with the EACC and AFSCME, and administrative function matters concerning negotiations with the county concerning school seating allocations. And anything else the board needs to add? Need a motion?
So moved. So moved.
Wilson, second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Ms. Abel?
Yes.
Brown?
Yes.
Ms. Battle Lockhart?
Yes.
Mr. Hancock?
Yes.
Mr. Lucas?
Yes.
Ms. Wilson?
Yes.
And Ms. McGraw, yes. All right, this meeting is adjourned to executive session.
Quit the meeting. Thank you.
Okay.